All right, let's call the meeting to order. We need a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting that we sent out.
That's Jane. Hey Jane, we just started, I'll put it on speakerphone. Can you hear me? Yeah. Jane's here. Jane Rice.
So anyway, back to the minutes from November 19th.
I think a motion
Do you
we
have any
accept.
questions? The motion to approve them?
I'll make a motion.
Okay. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, President's remarks. There's already been some little bit of whispering around about it, but we've gotten two pieces of bad news in the last few days or months. Gary has decided that he's served long enough, and he probably has. I mean, he's been the backbone of this whole organization for a long time. So he really would like to step away from being the roads chairman. Sometime probably in the end of it, early in the spring. He'll stay with it for a while, but he really wants to step away from it, which means we need to find somebody to step up, which I don't hold much hope for volunteer-wise, because we don't seem to be able to get volunteers to do anything. But we did put it in the newsletter. I talked to Gary some about it, and one possibility I raised, maybe a partial solution, and that's to maybe we could expand the duties of our the two guys we've had doing our maintenance work, our mowing and so forth, because they are moving around the community to do that kind of work. And between Robert and Joe, maybe that would be a possibility. We could expand their work to do it. I think we could make it work. Gary did raise one good point, though, and that's that we probably really ought to have somebody in the board that gathers that information from them and has some kind of authority to approve it. And I think we could do that. I mean, I think they could, if we did expand their duties to cover that, have them check the roads. So it'd be primarily doing the things that Gary's been doing. Doing storm surveys, things like that, to see if there's damage that needs to be cleaned up. Recommending when we bring in snowplows. And they can bring that to Rhea, and she can talk to me or other officers, and I think we could make this work if we don't get anybody to volunteer and stuff. So I don't know, any thoughts?
It's a good idea to use Joe or other person.
I assume we would pay Joe.
Yeah, we would just expand their duties and let them, be part of their time and materials, pay for their little bit of travel that they do to drive around the community, and they could report up to us for approval.
Should I, Joe's at the office right now, he came in to do the sealing in the bathroom. Should I mention it to him, or do you want to wait
Well,
and talk to him?
it wouldn't hurt to, just raise the possibility with him and
Ask
see
him
if he's
if he'd
interested.
be interested.
It could be, we could bring in both of them if Robert still wants to do some work, which would help, divide the work up a little bit and not overwork either one of them. That's what they're trying to avoid, especially Joe.
Yeah.
But I know they both can use the money, so it may be something they'd be interested in doing.
Okay.
Jenna,
Where does Robert live?
CRE.
Ranch Club. So he's nearby.
Yeah, okay.
So it's not like they have to come across the bridge or something to check things out.
And he and Joe have met
Yeah.
in hand, so they have somewhat of a relationship. I mean, little bit.
And Gary said if we ended up wanting to do this, then he would work with them to try to show them what needs to be done, the kind of things that we would need to do, the frequency of it. And then they would report up to RIA. I think that's probably the easiest place to start, and give them recommendations and provide approval. So let's see if anybody, go ahead and talk to Joe and Robert, see if they're interested.
Okay.
And we'll go from there. Okay.
At the same rate of pay, I assume?
Yeah.
What we do have, as we're going to be driving around, we've got to pay something, you know, we've got to do a mileage allowance.
Right.
I was giving Robert mileage because he asked for it, and Gary said, yeah, why not? Never thought about it. I mentioned it to Joe, and he didn't seem to feel like they used that much, but with this,
Well, but
it's-
yeah, with this, they're going to be
If
driving.
they're doing this,
It's
you
more,
know, put more miles
Yeah.
on, I think it's fair to
Mhm.
provide them private money.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful for Gary to, work with them and the
Oh, yeah.
to make sure that they know what it
Well,
entails.
Right, he told me that he would plan on, whatever we end up doing, whether it's a volunteer or whether Tony steps up and says, I want to do it,
Hey, Tony.
or we get, we hire some time to do it. Gary will work with them to kind of do the training.
I think it makes sense that RIA be their first reporting base, because they do sort of work for her.
Oh, right, yeah.
You know, she handles their assignments.
Yeah.
So that makes sense.
And
What-
she knows if she thinks she needs to get officer approval, she knows what to do.
What if I talk to Joe and Robert, and then in a week, somebody steps up and says, I'll volunteer to do that?
Well,
I mean,
tell them, we're just trying to explore possibilities right
Okay.
now. And if,
okay.
Well, yeah, everything in life can change.
yeah,
Well, I know, yeah. That's true.
hopefully we won't, I'm sorry. The biggest hurdle right now will be whether we end up having a snow removal.
Well, yeah, and that is.
But I think Gary will be able to carry us through most of that probably, at least this winter, and get, things going, or he can bring, whoever we have, he can bring them into that process on how that works.
And that's always a hard call to make.
Yeah.
I mean, if you say, yeah, salt, and then it warms up and rains, you just spent $10,000 to have it all washed into the side of the road.
Yeah,
I don't want to do that.
I know.
I'll go home, guys. 2 o'clock in the morning, just kidding. No.
Okay. And the other piece of not good news is that Jeff McDonald also wants to step away. And in fact, he's already turned in his road materials and so forth. I guess he's retiring. And Jenny, could you mute? Jenny?
Hello?
Yeah, there's a lot of noise coming from your end. Could you mute?
Yes, we'll do.
Okay, thank you. So anyway, I guess he's retiring from the county, right?
He retired from the county about a year ago.
He's already retired, but he's now wanting to retire from our work too. So Gary and I talked about that. I offered Gary a job. He says, thanks, but no thanks. So again, we've got a big hole to fill, but we've got time on this because we won't be doing any major, the paving work. I think we've already got a plan in place.
I think we still have 2 years left on Jeff's 5-year plan or 6-year plan.
But the main thing is, that once we get into it next year, is somebody to monitor the contract letting and laying out the plan with whoever we hire and doing all that kind of.
And then his actual technical expertise with
Right,
fire
right.
And he was very hands-on. I
That's
mean, he was out there working with a rake and was
Yeah.
Right.
on that inside the backup stones,
So again, when he talked to you about this, did he offer any kind of transition help or anything?
I didn't think to ask him about that. He might be willing to, for instance, if this other man from the county would want to do it, but yet that's not his real strong suit. Jeff knows this man, and maybe would be willing to kind of guide him to begin with.
Well, it'd be helpful.
Yeah.
Gary could probably help on that too, but
Right.
that would be helpful. I also had mentioned too, we may want to check with the state, with the Prince Frederick guys, and see if anybody in that side, with a similar background, some kind of road engineering background, might be interesting.
Okay.
If you have any contacts there.
I've got a couple of names. I wouldn't call them contacts in particular. I just have some names.
We'll
You know.
at least float the question out there,
Right.
see if anybody might be interested.
Okay.
I've also got my new next door neighbor that bought the,
The Ciscos? The
Richards.
Cisco?
Hmm?
The big house there on West Street?
No, the small. Anyway, the guy that bought that is a paving contractor.
Oh.
Got a big
Okay.
paving business up in the Bowie area. And he's kind of thinking about trying to step away more from that and spend more time down here. So I'm gonna, next time he's only here on weekends, and next time I see him, I'm gonna talk to him and see if he might have any interest in it. Of course, he would have to recuse himself from, any kind of, like, him trying to bid on something for his company. But I think he was trying to get away from that a bit anyway, so I'm gonna talk to him and see if there's any interest at all.
That would be, seems to me like the best option, if you really,
Yeah.
because he would know,
Sure.
Well, yeah,
you know.
right.
Technical expertise.
The last, there didn't really seem to be much difference other than looking at price
Mhm.
about the different proposals.
Right.
But this year, one of the prices that came in, I heard Jeff talking to Gary, and he said, well, I don't know, that company, the mix they use, he didn't like it.
Right.
That's the first time I've heard them even talk about the quality of the material. And that's something somebody like that
Well,
would
that's
be
right.
aware
Yeah, there's a bunch of issues involved
of.
in
Yeah.
planning and
Mhm.
doing the actual laying out of the road work
Right.
that needs to be done. Although you think the contractor should be able to do a lot of that themselves, but still,
But that would increase our
you
price.
need some guidance on
Right.
what they're doing. But, so though, anyway, these are options we're gonna have to start working. Thanks again, Tony, for leaving me with all this. Oh, I'm sorry.
I think that,
It was out loud again, Mike.
yeah, I'm just lucky.
Okay,
Yes, you
so,
are. Timing is everything.
okay, do you have an update on the office?
Not yet. Back to collections again, because ordinarily this would be the time of year where I would be filing claims on people. And in the spring, with COVID coming on us, I prepared a lot of paperwork, but I didn't file it because I needed to file a claim on somebody who maybe had lost their job. So I held on to it. But what I've been doing lately is sending an updated statement, and to that statement, I attach my little tag that says, you're in danger of having a claim filed. That's easily ignored. So this time, I attached the claim form. Not filed, but there it is in front of them, it's filled out. I've had 2 or 3 people come in and pay a rather significant amount. So I thought, hey, that's a good thing to do. Rather than that tag that's like, oh yeah, she's gonna get to me, but not this year, kind of thing. So that's another little way that we're doing it. Plus I sent out mid-year statements, so next year's budget, we will have overspent postage, probably. Not a significant amount, but it really seemed to be a good option, and maybe even better than doing claims, because I've gotten a lot in from that, I think. So, I called, and the tractor and the tools, hand tools are picked up tomorrow for the yearly maintenance. There's a company, Smith, I think, in Lexington Park, who'll come and pick it up for us. And got our Smecco rebate check on the refrigerator today, $50.
Worked.
Yeah, I did. They don't know it was quick. And then the newsletter will go to the post office tomorrow. That's it.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, well, Gary's not here. He gave you some stuff on the inputs on the road.
Yeah, Carl Bowen called last week to get contact information for Gary, and then he and Gary talked. And apparently on Lake Terrace, where we're doing that cleaning out of the trench, the digging will have to be much deeper than he thought, which means more stone will have to be brought in at the end. And then one of the outlets from one of the pipes is badly clogged. And so that's going to increase the cost. He didn't say how much. Nor did Gary. So that was it.
I have a question, a couple of questions actually. The 15 feet utility that's on all of the property here, I had a situation the other day where
You come out the right of way?
the right of way, yes. At Overlook, where it branches, it comes out and it branches and comes around towards the clubhouse, there was a huge branch that had fallen off the tree and was blocking the road. And so I went to my neighbor next door and I said, I think this is on your property, that it's blocking the road, you need to, come out and look at it. Well, he came out and looked at it and he says, I'll call someone, which apparently he did because it was gone a little while later. But my husband and he went out later and looked, and the tree was in essence on the right of way, and there were 2 more trees that face in the curve. If you know where our house is, in the corner of it, in the curve of Overlook, that house is across the street on the corner of what is it, Lake, not Lake, but where it goes down, it dead ends down to the
It's Lake Terrace.
Lake Terrace, where the house is, tall house that faces the lake. That house, directly across the street, in the right of way, is 2 trees that are completely laden with ivy, and they're leaning so bad that if they fall, they're going right straight on that house. That tree it will fall right on their house.
So this is on Lake Terrace, Overlook goes around.
It's
Goes to
the
the left, becomes
house.
Overlook, so it's the street to the left just before it curves around.
Yeah, if you're coming down towards the clubhouse on the left-hand side, it's the last house on the left, kind of corner from my house. It's the one that has the camper in it. He just bought a camper. There's a lot of things in his front yard. They just have a roof put on. Actually, his address is Beretta, not Overlook.
Okay, I think I know the house. It's on the corner of Beretta and Lake Terrace.
Yes, yeah.
I think I know that. And there's a carport with.
There's a car,
lots
there's a
of-
boat, an old boat sitting in there.
But the tree is in our right of way.
That is what Denny and my husband determined, that it's not on Denny's land, it is in right of way.
But is it on Beretta?
It is on Beretta,
Then it's
yes.
So
not
that's
on-
county right of way.
That's county road.
Oh, is it? Okay. All right.
When I leave, I'll take a look at it and make sure I know which one we're talking
Okay.
about. But yes, that would be, although there's a sign that says end of county maintenance. And I don't know where that is in relation to.
Yeah, it could be right at that line somewhere.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll take a look at it.
Okay, take a look at it.
The other question I have is, at the causeway on Riverview Terrace, the drain is running, but it's really slow. There's a lot of leaves and pine tags that are clogging up that drain on the lakeside. So I don't know.
Did you mention that before? I talked to Gary about, I think I've talked to Gary about that.
Okay.
Maybe not, maybe that was just anchored.
It's running, but not like it was back in, the late summer, early fall. It's just dribbling down that drain.
So maybe that pipe needs clearing.
Could be. But
Gary's
sometimes
up to
a lot depends on tide and, other factors like that. It's the same thing down here on the causeway. I mean, sometimes there's a rip roaring current going, one way or the other. If the tide's low, and the lake is draining, or if the tide is high and it's, draining into the lake.
Right.
So, and sometimes if it's kind of equilibrium, you don't think there's much going on, it looks like it's clogged, but it may not be. It may just be that, it needs to flush itself.
Well, I just noted that there's a lot of leaves and pine needles that are right there at that drain where it flows into the river, so I just wanted to check on it to make sure.
I know I had a report that Anchor Causeway, the pond there had a lot of debris and so on. And Joe went down, he's gonna try to clear some of that. And Gary looked at it first and said, yeah, some of that should be probably cleared out of there. Shall I ask Gary to?
Yeah, won't you?
Yes, I heard earlier this fall, as I walked by there, I could actually hear the water rushing out of the pipe,
Right.
going, into
Well,
the
yeah, like Mike said, that too probably depends on the tide a little bit. If it's equilibrium on either side, it's not gonna rush anywhere.
Yeah.
But
Now, the one, the causeway down here, I've been, riding by it and stuff, and it seems to be working pretty well now. So, but yeah, have Gary look at it. Any other questions on roads? Jack, money.
Okay. Now, first of all, income, important. As we have said, some of the back fees are being paid. You can see that covenant fees and mandatory assessment are ahead of budget pretty significantly, so that's good news for us. The others are in line. Special tax interest, state highway use revenue, all about as expected. And expenses, a little anomaly about the claims filing fee. I'm really excited to talk about that is having a surplus in expenses. Unusual $44 extra. And the only other notable charge is the legal fees are quite a bit ahead of budget, but it's to be expected with the issues we have. One other, the office building landscape and repairs, most everything is on budget, so it's just exactly where we want to be. I'm just mentioning the ones that are over budget. And the one is line 6650, office building landscape repairs. I think that's due to our roof, fixing the leak in the bathroom ceiling.
yeah, well, yes. And, yeah. The refrigerator went under furniture, went under furniture. Yeah. So yeah, that's the roof and so on.
It turned out to be, kind of a bargain. It wasn't surprisingly not that expensive. So.
Right. Well, and for the roof, remember we drew 7,500 out of the reserve account. If you look at the balance sheet, you'll see the reserve account is down. I mean,
Yeah.
you may not have that memorized from last month, but it's down by 7,500 because I transferred. And that's the reserve strictly for the office building. And we also replaced carpet this year, flooring with carpet.
So the profit loss budget versus actual looks pretty good. Well, the other one where we are ahead of the budget is the major road repaving. That we always agreed would be an extra effort this year. We paved a lot more. And budget for the project inspector manager, Jeff, is a little higher because that's a percentage of what we actually spend. So roads right away capital is a little bit ahead of where we budgeted.
And if I may, work that's being done on Lake Terrace should come out of STD, that stormwater construction budget line, there's 20,000 in that, that's STD money.
Okay.
But in general, we want to use up the STD money before we use our own money. And keep those balances held by the county to a minimum. We'll use them up if we have to, and then just rely on our own funds. We want to keep doing that. And that's it, that's all I saw of notes in the budget.
Okay. Environment?
I have nothing this time.
Nothing?
No, if Jenny has anything, she's unusual, so.
Jimmy, anything on the environment?
Nothing.
Okay. Safety, did Peter give you anything? Okay, well then, Peter had, around the last meeting, Peter had raised a question about liability for volunteers. So Rita did a bunch of research with our insurance, and I helped. Basically, we satisfied ourselves that volunteers are covered in a number of ways. First off, our insurance policy states under liability that volunteer workers are considered to be insured from a liability standpoint. For basically anything other than criminal or willful negligence, injury to another employee, that's not covered. But their liability to third parties would be covered. There's also something called the Volunteer Protection Act that was put in place with Congress, I guess, but it's been in place for a number of years. It's a little bit similar to the Good Samaritan Act, where it protects people who are trying to do good, like volunteers. So again, there's actually federal protection, and the state implemented another act that goes along with it, the state of Maryland and many other states. But that basically protects volunteers, again, from anything other than criminal or willful negligence. So I think we're covered as far as their liability, volunteers' liability. And the other question was, well, are they covered? What if they get hurt? Well, in most cases, volunteers accept that responsibility when they volunteer. Now, some places go into a lot of, they'll have hold harmless statements and all kinds of other stuff. But most organizations that I've dealt with don't. But again, we found, and Rita's going to try to run some more stuff down on it.
I haven't had a response from him.
Our insurance agent hasn't been, to me, as helpful as maybe he could be. But there's another clause in our insurance that, under the bodily injury coverage that we have, that basically says employees are not covered by our policy for bodily injury unless, it says, except volunteer workers. So we're trying to find out, we may even have some coverage for volunteers under that bodily injury coverage that we have. So we're trying to check on that. He went into, to me, all kinds of unnecessary stuff about, well, we could pay them money and we could put them on workman's comp and all that. I have never heard of that happening with volunteers. Now, there may be some organizations, maybe something like Smile, where you have a group of people who are doing on-site volunteer work, on an almost daily basis. Maybe there's some coverage kind of situations for that. But for the minor incidental stuff that we have, I just think that's silly to pay workman's comp. And then workman's comp's only going to cover them for lost wages. Well, they don't have any lost wages other than the $5 stipend we give them, which doesn't make sense. And then you've got to deal with all of the paperwork and everything to actually create a stipend. So unless somebody else has objections, I say no. We're covered under they're covered from the standpoint of our liability insurance and the Volunteer Protection Act for them doing any harm, and then, I believe that there may be some coverage under our policy by that exception, and we'll find out more on that, but,
Send him an email, another
Like this.
email.
any other thoughts?
Can you clarify to me like what our volunteers do? Because I don't know that many volunteers. I need to get to see.
You guys are volunteers, but I don't know, I guess that's.
Yeah. We are, Gary is on the road,
Peter Holt.
Okay.
Peter,
I think Peter was talking about, if there's an emergency that happens or whatever, and let's say a tree comes down, and some of Peter's people come out and they start clearing the tree away. If in the process of clearing the tree, they damage someone's property.
Okay, I get it. Yeah. Okay.
And that would seem to be covered for.
and that, yeah, we're covered as an organization for that.
Okay.
And they would have coverage under that policy as a volunteer worker. So from a liability standpoint, I think we're covered. And I don't know about you, but most volunteer organizations, when you volunteer, you don't go into it expecting medical coverage. You have your own medical coverage. You feel like if you're covered well enough. Now, there's always a case that if the organization was grossly negligent and you were injured, then you have your own recourses for civil action against the organization. So to me, I think we're covered, and I say leave well enough alone.
And we actually tried a hold harmless document number of years ago. And people didn't want to sign it, including, if I recall correctly, Gary. And he had his good reasons for it, as I recall. So there's like one in the drawer with a signature on it. I think they were afraid that if we were negligent, then that would not give them any recourse. But I think if an organization was negligent, it wouldn't matter to do a hold harmless document.
No, those
If
are
you're negligent, that's a whole different thing.
things like that are usually not worth the paper they're written on when it comes to, if it actually comes down to civil action.
Right.
Okay. Welcome, everybody.
Jenna and Asha assembled 6 more buckets, gosh, more than a week ago now. I still have 4 on hand. And I've distributed 3 since our last meeting. And Jack just brought in 3 or 4 bottles of wine. So when I pick up more brochures, but right now we're good.
Okay, well, thanks. Thanks everybody for doing that. I think it's
It's been a
a
really
good community.
Mhm.
Thanks. Okay, planning committee, we did turn on coastline design to start the study on the beach. Haven't heard anything back from them yet, so it's going to take them a while to actually get out here and do the survey. So we'll go from there. All right, unfinished business, quick claims. I'm gonna start.
With regard to the fact that we own the structures? Or,
Well, no, let me start.
yes.
Okay, recall that, when the county is asked to do a permit for some kind of coastal structure, they come to us and ask us if there's the plats show the strip of land there, they come to us and ask us to give them riparian rights. So we talked about that, and Rhea has done some changes on our riparian rights.
I
Language.
did, and I sent it to everybody, and then I didn't bring a copy.
Okay, but basically, put in there that we're granting them the rights, the riparian rights, so that they can, under permit, we are not responsible for the maintenance or the liability on that, whatever they build. So we're trying to set that in place. We'll probably follow up with maybe, what we talked about, a letter
Yes.
to all of the waterfront owners who are, who have this strip of land, that, with the same kind of language in there, that we didn't build these structures, we are not accepting responsibility for maintenance or liability on them. I don't think that'll be challenged, but,
I
that's,
think so.
and then the other issue was, if this prior court case up in Anne Arundel County has established that in a similar community to ours, that the community owned all of these structures that the people had built, which I still find bizarre. But what I would like to do, if I had my brothers, would be just do a mass quitclaim and give all that property to the adjacent owner. But I know we run into opposition on that. What we have thought about doing, and I think my approach would be, when somebody comes in for one of these quitclaims to do something, whether it be to combine lots or whether it be to add new structures or whatever, that we tell them that we can give them riparian rights fairly quickly. And all it takes is an email and board approval. And there's almost no case that I think of where we probably wouldn't do that. But we could also tell them that if they want, we can ask for permission to give them a quitclaim of the actual strip of land. But that has to come back to the membership for approval. So it could take anywhere from 3 to 6 months before we could get a quorum in a meeting in order to have membership approval of that. The only other way around that would be to amend the bylaws.
Covenants.
Or the, I think it's the bylaws that say that we can't transfer anything
Oh, you're
without
right.
member approval.
You're right.
So anyway, that would be another possibility to look into, but again, that would have to go out to the membership and, get majority approval for a bylaw amendment. So those are kind of options we've looked at. We're going to go ahead and change the language on the riparian.
So, yeah, damn it. Anyway, Maggie had her copy. So the verbiage that I had added was, it already said all other property rights, including the easement rights of all Drum Point property owners, are retained by the party of the first part, provided any piers or others, and this is the part I added, provided any piers or other structures built in the above identified area include a step or access point as appropriate for traverse by Drum Point property owners. That's the part about access that we talked about. The party of the second part acknowledges full responsibility for maintenance and liability for any pier or other structure built on said property. So the question, if somebody comes in, if Maggie comes in and they want a quitclaim for riparian rights, I ask them what kind of quitclaim they want. Okay, they just want to be able to build a pier. So I explain the difference. Do I say to them, well, you understand that you're going to build a pier, but it will belong to the association? Or do I just not broach that? Because that,
I don't know, I think you need to disclose it.
you think we
There's a
should?
couple of real estate stands,
yeah.
disclose, so that's my opinion. That will, alleviate a lot of heartache.
Say it again.
I said, she was saying, should we tell them, that the pier that we may construct belongs to the association, or do y'all just let it go? My point is, we need to disclose that from a legal standpoint.
Yeah, and I guess it goes along with saying, we are not responsible for any maintenance and liability.
Now, can you also, when they come in, can you also say, you can go ahead and build a pier, but you have to understand that it has to be accessible to all Drum Point, property owners, that they
Because
they
of that strip of
they can come and use your pier. And
I don't know that I would put it that way.
Okay, yeah.
I'm thinking accessible, to be able to, and that's what this says, is to traverse across it. It doesn't say anything about I go out there to fish from your pier. I think that's sort of,
But you did say that Drum Point would retain ownership of that, right? Even though we would not be maintaining it. So why would we maintain ownership of it? What?
the law says we maintain ownership.
Because there's a existing court case that made a ruling on that. And it would have to be probably,
It's confusing.
It is,
It is a little
you just
bit.
wonder what the function is, what
Right.
function it serves. It's not, I don't understand English or what
It's
you
just
said.
I think it's just
Like, I
a,
get it, yeah.
Yeah, doesn't make sense why you would want to do that.
no, it's just a legality. It is the way it is.
but I guess that's where I would, then I would introduce the option of asking us for a property claim.
But even with the property claim, didn't you say the easement would still be there? But not, but then they retain the ownership of their pier or whatever, that's what you're saying.
I don't know if they do, but I think, I'm not sure I understand the real difference between the two, because I think with either one, there's still the
The
easement
easement
for
stays there.
use by others, it still remains in existence. And I think the pier, regardless of which claim is used, still remains the property of DPPOA, it's as absurd as we think that
I
is.
don't think it did, did
I'm not clear on that.
Well, if you own the property, then you also own the riparian rights and you own anything that's attached to that property. So I think if the property is transferred, it also transfers ownership of anything attached to it. It still leaves open this question about this interest of others, whether they can walk through there. Now, that's, I think, more of a possibility on the bay side where there's beaches and things like that that provide some access. In the inland, or the inlet side, you would really only access it by either trespass or by boat, or swim, or whatever, but by water. So it's,
Yeah, I don't understand the whole, the whole differences here, but I think the easement, regardless of which one you use, it still remains.
yeah.
it does.
Yeah.
But you're saying that if you, in Mike's case, where you're saying if it's not on the beach where you have no access, then it's meaningless.
But there are access.
There are some. At the top of Drum Point Lake, there's one.
Yeah, there's access.
Yeah, there are a few, but
On the creek, but
That they go across people's property or?
We actually have an easement at the top of Drum Point Lake. I used to think that'd be a great place to put some picnic tables, because it's right there on the lake, and we have an easement. But Gary said it's not, the access is hilly, and it's not a decent access point. It's like the easements were set up so we could have access to the water, but some of the poorer areas of access were chosen for those easements.
I hate to sound like a Talmudic scholar. This whole thing to me is starting to sound more and more like a difference with no distinction.
Kind of. I understand what you're saying. I understand.
yeah, and it could become a real Pandora's box that I
Yeah.
don't want, I'd like to avoid, because if it's opened up too much, then you open up people saying, well, I want to go fish off your lot.
Exactly.
Which is why I wouldn't even begin to say that to
No.
somebody.
But
technically,
Yeah.
at least the way our attorney interpreted it,
Yeah, you know,
Did
it's,
you get any other interpretations? You were saying you might talk to some local.
I did, I finally got a hold of John Norris yesterday, the county attorney, and we talked. It was kind of difficult talking. He wasn't in the office, he worked from home. And I tried to explain to him all this background and so forth that's gone into this and the questions. And he said, you know, just one of the questions I asked him, I said, from a county standpoint, what do you people consider to be ownership? You've got my lot that you're assessing, you're providing permitting for, you're putting restrictions on, et cetera, and that plat shows a dock and a bulkhead. Who owns it? He kind of shrugs. And his closing statement was, the county doesn't decide property rights. Well, I'm not done with him yet. I'm going to go back with him.
follow-up conversation is required.
Yeah, I mean, this is just, this whole thing is
And
bizarre.
then we had another woman I talked with the other day, and she hadn't requested a quitclaim because she didn't know she might need to. She has all her permits in place, including county. She was not told to come and get a quitclaim, so she sent me a copy of their survey, which she had done when they had the lots combined. And this is on, is that the bay? Yeah, it's on the bay.
Yeah,
Down off the beach.
on Surf.
Surf, thank you. And sure enough, their survey shows their property line going right out into the water. So what does that mean?
Yeah.
Do we not have that strip? Did it erode to the point? Maybe the strip was there at one point?
Oh,
and now
very
it's-
possible.
So do we lose that
Probably
strip?
that.
Is that what we do? We lost
Well,
that strip?
but still, and remember on the drawing, it says, and that wedge that's out there in the bay,
Mhm.
it says, subject to title,
Right.
something, but, so it's, that description of that land is basically contrary to Maryland law, which says that Maryland owns the land underneath the water, below the high water mark. Okay?
And so my question would be, what does her deed say? What description is in her deed?
I have to look at the deed.
That would be the answer, in my mind, to the question. Because if the description is current and it's correct, and it includes that strip, then they own it.
And what happens to,
Well, but again, it's contrary to existing state law that says you don't own it.
Yeah.
In Virginia, they could get away with that, because Virginia allows you to own land underneath the water.
but if when you bought it, it wasn't underneath the water, you're saying that
Well,
that
but
just
see,
goes.
the way riparian rights are treated is, if you gain land by accretion, then you gain it. You gain it down to the mean high water line. If you lose land by flooding,
Yeah,
you lose land, because then the high water mark moves up. You only own the land down to the mean high water line.
okay, so that,
So you can gain it or lose it.
and then what happens to the idea of the easement of people in the community?
The strip of land.
Does that go away also?
That was my question.
Does
That's not
that-
logical. I still don't understand, what happens to that strip of land, the easement, whatever you want to call it.
Because you don't want it coming onto,
I don't know.
because I don't want it coming onto my front yard, my bayside yard, I don't want it going up on the hill.
No. But if legally, if it does, then, I guess you don't have anything
Well,
to say.
I think that's one of those things where this wasn't thought of when they did that, obviously. So,
But apparently the county says, well, they own the land down to the water, therefore we don't need to ask you for riparian rights, right?
Yeah.
They didn't ask for,
who doesn't?
The county did not send them here for a riparian right, or a quitclaim.
So it's basically decide what we're gonna do? Is that the answer?
As far as what
Well,
to
I
say.
think I don't know, I mean,
Because will you have,
to me, what I would like to try to do is try to establish with the community that responsibility for these structures that they or prior owners built is theirs.
That makes sense.
And
yeah,
just leave it at that.
Yeah,
yeah.
And
that's fine.
And now if they come in for this repairing right quick claim, then do you want me to say, oh, also, by the way, you can go to the community and request a full quick claim, which gives you ownership of your dock?
But what's the,
But I think
oh,
that's
yes,
all
let's
right.
leave it
Anyway,
at
because I
that.
don't know what that means, yeah.
I mean,
But
that's,
yeah, I don't think it gives them ownership of the dock.
well, see, that's debatable because it's,
That's the whole problem.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
I have to reread this opinion again.
I think we should just use the language that you said, because I feel like this is gonna cause more
Yeah,
confusion.
yeah,
And then not mention.
and we can't even explain it to ourselves,
Yeah.
really.
You know, and
So-
the truth is, in spite of full disclosure and everything, you know what? Let's not disclose facts we don't understand.
right.
That makes sense.
Let's just tell them what it is, and if they ask specific questions, fine. But to open Pandora's box,
Right.
which we can't even explain,
Yeah.
we can't explain it among ourselves.
Right.
And the important thing is
Somebody else.
that they are required to maintain that. We don't,
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's,
that's
one thing.
yeah.
And the other is that the easement for the community remains.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to leave it. That
Yeah.
you build it, you're responsible to maintain
And
it.
both of those are
That's
in
your right.
the easement.
Other than that,
If anybody challenges it, we can handle it on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
Right.
We don't even know.
so we really didn't get an answer from the attorney? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think it's just hard to.
It's-
I would say they don't understand it either. I would maintain that. They can't explain it.
My follow-up question to him is going to be, okay, you're not deciding property rights, but are you considering the value of these structures in your assessment of my property?
Mhm.
And if you are, then to me, that sort of de facto says you're acknowledging that I own it.
Yes,
And then then you butt heads with the prior court. And we say, well, and I want to go back and read those court cases again and see if I can get a better understanding of what the real issues were.
and the truth, I think the truth of the whole question will come out if there's ever a specific court case that addresses like a liability or an injury issue on a dock, then it'll get issued. Otherwise, it's open for
It's all,
discussion.
I agree.
2 lawyers will give you 3 opinions.
Yeah.
Right,
And
right. And we also, well, I still think that we ought to, if asked or questioned about these rights versus ownership, we can still say, if you want to, you can request a transfer of the property. Okay, but it's going to take time.
And we still own the easement.
Because there are other reasons.
We
Yes.
still have to allow access.
Yeah, we
Still
still
have to
have
allow
access.
access.
Well, yeah, I guess until that's settled, but I.
So then that same verbiage should go in the full quick claim.
I would say,
Yeah.
Okay.
we intend to own
Yeah,
this.
I think the quick claim I have, which granted me property, has language in there about easements and rights of ways and stuff, so.
But I think we need to eventually sort this out and understand it, because there could come a time when somebody starts to do class action suit against us for.
good, then we get an answer.
Yes.
Right.
Don't dig ditches where there aren't holes.
Right,
I don't see, this has existed for a long, long time.
Right.
Yeah.
Lawyers can't give us a straight answer. We read what the lawyer sent us, and I'll bet there are 3 opinions in this room what he said.
Well, I was gonna say, if you wanna come in the office and read his 4-page, right, I think.
Well, you said that.
Did I say that?
You said that earlier,
Okay.
yeah.
And, you know,
Those aren't supposed to, just so everybody knows,
it's-
that's supposed to be kept within the board's,
Okay.
Yeah.
you know.
You know, and we can't understand it. We certainly as hell can't explain it to anybody. And the truth is, it will get sorted out when we get sued,
Well,
and not before
we've
that.
forgotten to mention too that we asked the insurance agent about this.
Oh, I'm good.
Oh, go ahead.
That's my next.
You want to, because that's
You
what,
can.
I'm sorry.
You did all the work.
Well, it's so confusing. He went to the underwriter, and this is whether, with regard to our liability and so on, for maintenance and so on, and if somebody should get hurt. So the underwriter says, my thoughts are, piers and docks are considered structures. Regardless of who built the pier or dock, it is physically connected to land or beach owned by the association. There are no exclusions for liability on piers or docks. There is an athletic activities exclusion, so if someone was having a regatta off of a pier and somebody got hurt, there would probably be no coverage for that. We wouldn't be covered for that. There is a pier list on the December, or on the declaration, I guess, but it is for that's our pier. That's the one we have. That's specifically listed. But he says, I think they would have liability coverage for the additional piers attached to community land. He thinks we're covered. Is that how you read that?
Yeah. That our general liability policy covers this common property.
If
whoever-
somebody got hurt.
So if it's
Somebody-
established,
Yeah.
if it's established that we own it and are responsible for it, our coverage, our current coverage covers it.
But we're not responsible for maintaining it, that
Well,
No,
pier.
this is just liability.
This, he was talking about liability.
Okay,
I guess we are responsible
Well-
for maintenance, but yet we couldn't get forced to maintain it.
but
Or
then,
replace it if it's
then are
working
we
out.
remiss then? I mean, could somebody then
Then
take
get
it?
hurt because it wasn't.
It's just so
I
mushy.
know.
It's so mushy.
Well, and then to follow on with what Mike said a few minutes ago, about the letter. The agent responded, I asked him, should we send letters out to all waterfront owners? He said, you may still want to send them a letter. It's not an issue until a claim is filed, and it would appear that it would be covered under your liability as long as the pier is physically connected to your property. So, yes, a letter should go out, in their opinion, to all waterfront owners and subsequent owners. I mean, that's something I have to put in on I do an office manual. When I replace somebody, maybe they can go there for reference, and I'll add that to say, if Bonnie sells her property to Jim, Jim needs to get a letter saying, we're not responsible for your pier, or whatever, structure.
How many properties have these piers or structures?
I have no idea. To me, it should just go out as a blanket, rather than trying to research, well, do you have a pier, do you have a structure, I don't know.
But I'm gonna get this letter, and I'm not gonna know what to do with it. It's gonna-
Well, if you have now, or if you ever build,
Yeah.
a structure, the association is not liable, responsible for it.
You know,
Just a general.
in actuality too, I mean, the people who own these properties with structures, generally, your own insurance covers you for liability and damage to those auxiliary structures on your land, whether it be sheds or whatever. So if you do have coverage, most people do of some kind, they generally do cover those kind of things. So,
But is it your
It's our
land?
ours, yeah. Our homeowners cover our dock.
yeah, so does ours. I mean, so that's, all of these things point to me, say to me, you own it. Because your insurance company will acknowledge that, the county, I think, will acknowledge that they have considered in their valuation of your property, et cetera. So anyway.
So why do we maintain that we still own those things?
Because there's a court case that
It's just-
says we do. That's why.
This is
So, but this is the whole problem with this whole can of worms. I like the fact that the underwriter made some sort of prognosis on liability. That would be worth a can of holes the minute something happens and the insurance companies start arguing about who's really liable.
True.
And I certainly hope the guy who owns the dock has his own not only liability insurance for that, but also an umbrella policy.
Yeah,
Because
that's
he's probably going to need it.
Right.
It's,
So
this
Yes.
is.
who started this whole thing, and are they still?
Well, I think Yeah,
She asked me though, what is it that gives us ownership? She
Does
wanted
she-
to know, why does she need a quitclaim?
well, she came and asked you.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
But I mean,
So it
does
shows
she-
you a deed
Yeah.
that shows the transfer from
Do you-
Jerry, the road company, to the association.
Do you think she understood that the easement still stood?
Well,
That's the,
so
I think that's
the
what
page
is
that she
underlying
wanted a
this.
copy of and took a picture of, or
Mhm.
maybe I made a copy of it, is the page that says, subject to the rights of others.
Yes, but
Or
the
the interest of others. Because she said, well, what does that mean? And I said, well, I suppose, I don't know, but I suppose it means the community, subject to, and that's what started it.
But if the, I know that, and the fact that the easement allows community members to
Access.
traverse that space, I have the feeling the reason this whole came up was she doesn't want people traversing that space.
Well, perhaps, but she's not pushed beyond just getting
The riparian rights.
the riparian rights and seeing that deed that said subject to the interest of others. Now, I don't know, maybe she's right now talking with her lawyer saying, how can we circumvent this?
I mean, so that she can prevent people from coming across. So
She
that's how
can't, I mean, she can't.
You know,
It's
again,
all
if
sorted
we're-
because-
if we're challenged on
Right.
a case like that,
Mhm.
then we'll deal with
they
it.
will, yeah. But that's how it came up. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, that is the beginning.
Yeah.
Either correct their thinking or get
Right.
challenged,
Or get
or
sued.
whatever, and we'll do it.
But again, I don't think she had any motive other than, to say, well, okay, if I want, I don't even know how she came up with, she was talking with you one day, I think, about quitclaims.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned, well, you got a quitclaim. And that's when she came in
And then,
and got the quitclaim. But I don't think she had any ulterior motive to say, I want to keep people off the property. I think she was thinking,
well,
why
wait,
do I
wait,
do
wait,
this in
wait,
the first place?
wait, those of us
That
who,
never came up until this summer with the COVID and nobody going anywhere, and all of a sudden there were people on the beach.
Oh, it came up, it's come
and
up for
that,
years.
no, but I mean,
It
that
just
was what got her started on this,
I think
because
that's
she didn't want people.
I haven't
It got
seen-
started the latest time, but when she first moved there, she had issues with her beachfront and the people that live over here whose kids had always played.
Well, she
there.
had issues with her beachfront because people were cutting across
Her
her property.
lawn.
Her lawn,
Like a fence down or something.
Yeah, they were cutting across her lawn.
which
Well, yeah,
which she had,
put the fence up.
that's why she put the fence up.
I'm just saying that this particular time,
Mhm.
it was just a question of her thinking, well, what is it that gives you the right to have to give me a quitclaim? Why do you have to give me a quitclaim?
That's a good question.
And that's when I showed her the deed.
Kind of wondered myself.
It's in the deed. Really? Not much foresight by whoever built it out 40 years ago.
Okay, well, I'm sure the saga will continue as we go.
Question.
Yeah.
When we give out these quick claims, you're talking about adding language, Rhea. Has the lawyer review this and
No, that's a
sign
good
off?
question. Should I send that to him to sign
Yeah.
off? And
Yeah.
try to
I
send
might
it
have
in?
someone to sue if we get sued.
We want,
It won't
and,
cost as much for a quick.
He might just a quick review.
and functionally, we want to have him understand what we believe that the easement for people traversing, especially the beach, if people walk the beaches all the time, that remains our community right.
Well, he's
think
he's
he's
pointing
always
that out
said
there.
Okay.
He's-
All right.
And are these quitclaims to be recorded with the county?
Oh, yeah, you can give
They,
it.
Yeah.
they do get reported. I don't do it. I mean,
Yeah.
whoever I give it to apparently reports it.
They are
They are,
recorded.
they're there, that one too.
Because that gives them the right to build their pier or whatever,
Yeah.
if they have the proper permits.
But it's a recorded process. Okay, anything else on that for now? I'm sure it'll stay as unfinished business for a while. We'll learn more.
Mhm.
Okay, going around the room, any other new business? Tony?
I have a question. Is it the covenants or the bylaws that say we're not supposed to have signs on our lawns? I don't know.
Covenants.
It's a covenant. All right, political season is over. We can wait until the inauguration to finally ask people to remove their political sign. But I have noticed that, for example, we have a "We Believe" sign.
The virtue shaming
Yeah,
sign.
well, we have a "We Believe" sign with a lady that I've talked to about 3 times. And every time I've talked to her, she puts it back up on the porch and waits a couple of months and puts it back down on the lawn. And now there's one right across the street from the office.
Yeah.
sending people
Can I send
letters.
out a community-wide email saying as
Yes.
of January 20th, whatever the inauguration is?
Well,
Please remove all political signs.
Yeah.
but these
Further
virtue shaming signs aren't those. These are, I hope, we believe in science and we believe in, like if you don't have that sign, you're obviously,
Yeah, if you don't have the sign, you don't read the sign.
yeah.
But, there are two concerns. One, if we don't do anything about signs, okay, say, well, it's a good cause for the sign. Well, what if somebody put up a sign that said, "We still mourn the lost great cause"? Now, we all know what that means. Are you gonna let them leave it up?
But the thing to me is, it's
And it looks
It's kind of,
trashy.
it's tacky for the neighborhood, and I think we want the neighborhood to look nice. And okay, if you're having somebody do some work on your property, they have a sign flying, they take it when they're done. Or in political seasons, yes, you have your political signs up,
Or a for
but you
sale
take them off,
sign.
or for sale sign, but, these other things, they're just getting to be
Well, and
tacky.
does that include flags?
Hmm? The
Does
what?
that include flags as well?
I don't know.
No,
I
it's
think
nothing
it's
about
just
that.
a sign.
No, it's not a sign, that's not
What
a
if it's a
sign.
political flag?
Well, I don't know, I haven't seen
I
it.
mean,
Yeah, I don't know.
I just,
Yeah, the
But
post
you-
is on their land.
But who's to judge, like, I mean, it's either, in my opinion, you either have no signs, or, I mean, who are we to judge, like, who can have what sign?
Well, I think
Say
we're-
no sign, say no sign.
that's why Tony was saying.
No signs.
No signs at all, because you can make the argument, whether you agree with this
So
type
they
of
were
sign
just
or
saying
not.
we could have
Just say no
signs
signs
or-
across the
No
board.
signs.
Because, yeah, what if somebody says, I want to have a neo-Nazi sign in my yard?
Well, no, and everybody,
Just,
and you start
I'm
having,
just saying.
That's different.
if you go down the street, every house has to have a sign, I mean, it looks tacky, it looks, this is not,
Well,
this is.
that's the other thing. Oh, yeah, okay, fine. So we all think that here we believe signs are wonderful. And
I don't
I don't
say
think
that.
so.
No, I'm setting up a hypothetical. So we all say, okay, they're fine. Now, every single house puts up a sign. That's not exactly a neighborhood I want to live in.
No, it looks tacky and it's not,
I just don't like the signs. I have nothing on my car.
I don't even care about the sign per se, but it's visual clutter, and I think it just destroys the desirability of the neighborhood. I would,
So shall I go ahead and send out a community-wide email to say, as of the inauguration, please remove all?
well,
Well,
it's not just
Maybe
political
we
signs.
start out by reminding people that covenants.
Well, I would definitely vote covenants,
remind them that the covenants say,
no signs.
we understand that, this has been
Highly politicized.
Contentious.
political
I think
campaigns.
I think that's gonna add more political.
So maybe not even mention anything
I wouldn't
about
mention anything.
political.
No, nothing.
Just
No
signs.
signs.
Remind everybody covenants prohibit signs.
Yes, that will do it, I think that will do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's no date to it, because that's obviously.
Right.
Oh, and you know what, you may want to also put in there, whatever the covenant number and the exact verbiage.
Yeah,
Because otherwise,
Yeah.
someone's going to say, what do you mean, what do you mean?
because Tony got into it with one of the neighbors that, then,
Oh, I finally just said, no, it's fine. I just walked away.
but then he gave it to the lady across the street that he's putting,
Yeah,
bringing
that's
a
right.
portion of his out.
there's no signs without permission of the renter,
Which is us.
Speaking of, visual,
Clutter.
clutter, I have a question. There's a house on Beretta, the gentleman died, and, family went in, started chucking stuff out the front door, and, got rid of what they chucked out, but they cut trees down, branches down. It's laying in the front door. There are 2 broken windows on each end of the house. Is that part of our covenants to say you need to do something, or no?
So,
If it were part of our covenants, the house on Pilot would be taken care of. There's a few still. We can't do anything, other than to send a letter and say, remind people of values in the community, and, it's come to our attention that your house is a mess. I wouldn't say it quite like that.
you're saying that this
Because you have no pride.
because you have trash.
But in nicer verbiage than that.
Yeah, this is
And
family,
please,
I mean, you could make the case that it attracts vermin.
well, I've done that as
And-
well. I could, all kinds of things. And, and county ordinance does say, you know, an unlawful accumulation of trash. Grass no more than 12 inches tall.
Which is awful.
And I always include that and highlight the significant, you know, pertinent part to that place or to that house. But again, it's their choice. I would call the county and report it to zoning enforcement. And I'll give the example I always give. Years ago on Lake Drive, where it meets Huron, the house right across from the intersection on Huron, the grass was literally thigh high. And a couple people, you know, guys around the community that cut grass, knock on the door, hey, can I cut your grass? Get off my property. The owners had some issues. Finally, the woman who lived next door in a hut house, supplemental, whatever, hut house, kept her place neat as a pin. She came in one day, she said, I'm gonna have to leave because I have a 4-year-old who plays out back and they're now putting garbage out the back. And I'm concerned about rats. Everybody complains about the hut houses.
Yeah.
This place was owned by, you know, private owner. It was a mess. And that's, I think, what finally triggered that place to get cleaned out. Zoning enforcement had actually slapped a fine on them of $500. But the woman I used to talk with at zoning enforcement said, that's it. They can't collect it. They can't enforce it until the property is sold. They had to place a lien. They collected their $500. And it took a couple of years. Oh, well, it's a shame. We featured them in the newsletter, even. Not the house number, but like that yard. And sorry, there's nothing we can do. It's frustrating.
Things could be worse under President Mike.
Good job.
All right. Anything else?
The membership meeting is down here.
Oh, yeah.
So we should still be on unfinished business.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So we are going to go ahead and try to have the general membership meeting on the 12th, on Saturday, 10 o'clock. Reconfirm that the club is open for business, so we can do it. I seriously doubt whether we'll approach 25 people.
31.
Since we don't have anything really on the agenda that needs approval or anything. But if we don't have it, then come March, we'll be in the same predicament. At least if we have the meeting, then March, we can have it declared on a quorum. If we have business, if we have. So that's the purpose for doing it.
So it could be a short meeting.
So it should be a short meeting.
And we will have business to conduct because the nominating committee
Oh, yes.
will present the slate of candidates.
The entire board.
Oh.
Almost.
Yeah, six of the 9.
Alyssa also, yeah, there's 6 of the 9. Because of the, you were appointed, so you have to be, now you have to run. And the same, if you want, Alyssa. And then, who's the third?
What if I say no?
That's as interesting as quit claims.
Who's the third one? I can't think.
There's only 3 of us that are.
Jenny runs.
Jenny is up.
Oh, Jenny.
Jenny is also up.
Who? Jenny.
Jenny, I think she's
Yeah,
up, right,
right.
yeah, she's up to the.
So that's the 6th. That just hit me the other day when I was typing an email about being able to present or have a nominating. And I named you guys, and then suddenly it hit me. It's a whole new year. Anyway. So Jackie gonna run?
I guess so. Snap decision. Look at YouTube.
Jack's gonna run, Tony.
Okay.
Um,
I'll do it.
So we are schedule the next meeting. I am not, well, right now, I'm not supposed to be here on the 4th. That would be the first Tuesday in January. That all could change. So, the 5th, I guess 5th is the first Tuesday. Yeah, supposedly it won't be here, but, so we could
12th, because we're gonna have, you know, we have this meeting, and then on the 12th of December, we have the general membership.
Yeah,
So letting that board meeting slip a week is no big deal.
yeah.
Urgent, it's gonna pop up, you know.
Okay, if we do it on the 12th, I would need to do it at, well, Jack, is it premise open?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't think we're gonna be out of the COVID world.
I keep
We
thinking
may
one
have
more
vaccines
month.
by then.
I keep thinking one more month.
Yeah.
I know, yeah.
Yeah.
But I can't do it, well, we have to do it like at 11.
That's-
11.
that's-
That's good.
Okay, let's do the 12th at 11. Okay, anything else? All right, the meeting is adjourned. We'll get the board to hang around, read it out.
Unless we can go upstairs.
Oh, you have to-
Continue with the board.
Oh, okay.
upstairs.
Well, and you also
And then
have
we
to
can see.
make a motion to adjourn into executive session.
Okay. I could make a motion to go to executive session.
So I'm gonna say I'd like to make a motion to go to executive session to discuss everything we're going to discuss. Everybody has to vote yes, no, they abstain, or if they're not here. And that's it.
Okay,
So,
can I have a motion to go to executive session?
Make a motion to go to executive session.
second.
A second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Ginny, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
So vote yes or no to go to executive session.